Yo family, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we are hopping in for the first build video of the season or episode. I still can't get out of the habit of saying seasons. And today we are talking about an absolutely disgusting Arc Titan build. Now I did review all of the changes to the exotic armor buffs and changes in a recent video. If you want to check that out, I'll leave that on the end screen for you or on the card above. But within that, there was some changes to Titan exotic armor pieces, including the Eternal Warrior, the Ursa Furiosus, and the insurmountable skullfort. And at this current moment, this was the easiest build and testing to see that was going to be very viable for this season and beyond. So it doesn't really rely on the seasonal artifacts, they are only going to enhance this, but this build is incredibly powerful as well as being incredibly fun as well. So first of all, let's go through the subclass setup for this build. So I'm going to be running Thunder Crash with this just because it's a very good burst damage super, still very strong even though we won't be using the Fallen Star chest piece. If for some reason you do want to run Fists of Havoc, then you absolutely can, but obviously Thunder Crash would be what I'd pick for more difficult content. We're going for Rally Barricade for the lower cooldown and because it synergizes so well with that aspect. The jump is completely up to you. For me, I am taking Ballistic Slam on this. Ballistic Slam recently had some changes to it and made it a ton better, but for harder difficulty content, some of you may want to take Thunderclap and some of you may even want to take Seismic Strike for lesser content or on level content, which is absolutely fine. You are fully able to do that. It's just my preference is Ballistic Slam because I've found the way to be able to use it in both on level and harder difficulty content as well. For those wondering what I mean by changes to Ballistic Slam, they've changed it so it now grants a stack of bolt charge for each enemy hit by the Ballistic Slam. So if you can chuck yourself into a good group of 4 or 5 enemies, you're going to come out with a decent amount of bolt charges. They've also reduced the sprint time requirement to activate it from 1.25 seconds to 0.03 seconds. So essentially you can just move and you can launch straight into this. The damage now scales based on the distance traveled, so the higher you hit the enemies from, the more damage that it does, and the damage versus PvE combatants has seen an increase by 30%. So like I said guys, it is significant changes. It's not, just a little bit of a change. It's actually really good now, and when you test it out for yourselves, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But as I said, melee, you can choose whichever one you like. So for our first aspect, we are going to be going for Knockout. This obviously gives you health regeneration. Whenever you kill an enemy, it starts off your health regeneration and gives you Amplified as well. Amplified itself, guys, has also seen a buff. So whenever you are Amplified, it now grants you 15% damage reduction, which also stacks with your other sources as well. 15% in itself doesn't sound a lot, but trust me, it helps. And when stacked with other things, it also obviously makes a great deal of difference. So for each enemy that you melee whilst you have Knockout, you're going to get 50 HP, and like I said, it's going to grant you Amplified on those kills as well. And this of course works with the Ballistic Slam in synergy. For our second aspect, we are going to be taking the brand new one, Storm's Keep. If you don't have this, you can go and buy this simply from Glimmer from Ikora, so there's no tricks or trials and tribulations in order to unlock this like in the past. You can literally just go and straight up buy this. So when you put down your barricade, this is going to grant you and allies behind it bolt charge. So when you initially cast it, it's going to give you 4 stacks. And when you stand behind it, it's going to keep hitting max really quickly, meaning that you can deal damage with weapons and call down lightning strikes on enemies. So we kind of have the best of both worlds here, guys, in the fact that we are using Knockout with our Ballistic Slam to deal with ad clear, and that is going to be really powerful there. But also we can play from a distance using Storm's Keep with our weapons to do a ton of damage to more difficult enemies, elites, mages, whatever the case may be, or even bosses in damage scenarios for dungeons and raids. So the first fragment we're going to be taking is Spark of Frequency, which says melee hits increase your equipped weapon's reload speed and stability for a short duration. Obviously that helps, but the main portion of this that we're looking at is whilst amplified, the effects are increased and you gain increased stacks of bolt charge from all sources. So at base, this is going to give us 15 stability and 50 reload speed, as well as a 0.8 reload duration multiplier as well for 5 seconds. And then when amplified, this is going to enhance that. And it means that all sources of bolt charge that we're getting give us an additional stack as well. For our next fragment, we'll be taking Spark of Shock. Very, very simple, guys. It allows us to jolt targets with our arc grenades. Sorry, I should have said, I went straight into aspects and didn't say. I'm actually taking Flashbang Grenade with this. So this actually blinds nearby targets. So now we're going to be able to blind and jolt by pairing this with Spark of Shock. This is very good because blind can stun unstoppable champions. And it also renders other enemies disoriented for 10 seconds, meaning that they can't attack or use abilities, so this is also very good for crowd control. Obviously, by pairing the fragment with the grenade as well, this is going to allow it to jolt, and this actually stuns overload champions as well, so we've got a dual capacity thing going on here, which is very, very nice for any content with champions in it. We then take Spark of Resistance because obviously for the ballistic slam portion of the build will be in close proximity to enemies, so you have to be within 50 meters of at least 3 enemies for this to proc, but when it does, it gives you an additional 25% damage reduction, and that is going to stack with our amplified as well. And finally, we take Spark of Feedback, which gives us a 75% increase to our melee damage for the next 5 seconds when we are meleeed by another enemy. You can't refresh this buff, it is a one-off, but the kind of way that you play this is you'll ballistic slam into a group of enemies, you'll move around again and then go in for your next attack, so you'll be able to keep redoing this, and obviously 75% increase to that ballistic slam is a nice thing to have. This one is a bit of a flex slot though, so there may be some other things you want to consider in its place, and I think that's going to depend on the content that you're doing. So for example, if you are finding yourself not using the ballistic slam or the up close melee portion of the build as much in certain content, you are instead using that Storm's Keep, using more weapon damage, you may instead want to go for something like Spark of Beacons, which is going to allow your special and heavy arc weapons to create a blinding explosion when getting final blows whilst amplified. We're going to be amplified all the time, guys, so obviously this is something that you can take advantage of. So that'd be something I would do if you are finding yourself in situations where you are playing a little bit further back, dropping that Storm's Keep barricade and doing damage with your weapons. So let's move on to our armor mods for the build. So for the actual insurmountable skullfort itself, this did receive changes, as I said, with this new season coming out. So essentially what they did is they said that the insurmountable skullfort now grants energy to arc melee abilities when hitting targets with any melee attack. The amount granted varies based on the melee used. From most to least energy granted is powered melees, non-glaive unpowered melees while knockout is active, and unpowered melees including glaives. So because we're running knockout, guys, we're pretty much always going to have that powered melee in the beginning, and this obviously is a way to build back up that energy. So insurmountable skullfort has always pretty much been good in on-level content, but when you've tried to use it in something like Grandmasters or where there are more elites and mages and things like that, sometimes when you didn't get the kill off, it would leave you in a bad position because you'd be waiting a long time to get that melee charge back. However, now on the hit, if you don't get the kill, you automatically get refunded 50% of your melee energy, and then with these changes, it's made it significantly easier to get that charge back again. Plus, we also now have the Storm's Keep aspect, as I've mentioned, where we can play back a little bit until we get that charge back. So for mods on the skullfort itself, we'll be taking a hands-on. This is going to give us super energy whenever we get melee kills with that ballistic slam. If you can fit 2 on here, I couldn't because of the resilience mod that I needed to run, but if you can get 2 on here, even better. And you're then going to want to run a harmonic siphon so that we're getting orbs from our rapid arc weapon final blows. For our gauntlets, a quick lesson here so you can understand the decision I've made, and then in turn it will help you make a decision on what you're going to do about this. So you can run other things here. If you want to balance out your abilities more, you can use your usual suspects like impact induction, focusing strike, all those kind of things. The reason I am running heavy-handed 3 copies is because of the bottom portion of what it says. Equipping multiple copies of this mod increases the potency of the generated orb and reduces duration of the cooldown. So there is an intrinsic cooldown for using these mods on how often you can generate them. If you use 1 copy of heavy-handed, it will be 10 seconds before you can create an orb by getting a melee kill again. If you use 2, it's 5 seconds, but by using 3, there is only a 1 second cooldown between orb generation, meaning that pretty much by the time you've landed that ballistic slam, ran a little bit and done it again, you will already have passed that cooldown, meaning you can make an orb every single time that you do it. So as I said, you don't have to run 3. If you find yourself in content where you are not using the ballistic slam as much, you may want to knock off 1 for something else, or even 2, but just bear in mind you will have that cooldown on your orb generation. Of course, the more often you can make orbs of power, the more this is going to feed into the hands-on mod, which you'll have on your helmet, as we've just said. For our chest piece, I am simply running resistances, so 2 resistances to choose whichever ones you want between those 2 for whatever activities you're doing, and then I'm running charged up, which is going to increase the amount of armor charge stacks that I can carry. On the boots, I am running an arc holster. This means that it's auto going to be reloading my heavy weapon whilst I am doing other things. This means for machine guns or other things that I'm using, which we'll discuss in a minute, this is auto reloading and I haven't got to mess about doing that when I drop my barricade. Then running a recuperation just for a little bit of extra health when you get orbs of power, and then elemental charge, which is going to give us a chance at an armor charge when we create an ionic trace. Because we're using a lot of arc stuff, abilities and weapons, these are easy to come by, so that means that we can get our armor charges off of that. And the reason that we are building up armor charges is because on our class item, we're going to be using utility kickstart, meaning whenever we use our barricade, it will consume our armor charges and give us a significant amount of energy back, meaning we can put down those barricades and use Storm's Keep to build up our bolt charges more quickly. We then have powerful attraction, so again, when we drop our barricade, this is going to collect any nearby orbs. If you don't want to run this, I would suggest switching this out for Reaper. And then I am running Bomber with this, so just because I've really built heavily into melee a lot, obviously this is a way of just getting back that flashbang grenade because it is a useful bit of the kit as well, but it's more important to build into that melee side of things in my opinion. Feel free though to sort of balance it out if you want to based on what we've discussed about cooldowns and orb generation. For your stats, you're going to prioritize 100 resilience for the 30% damage reduction, which will also stack with our amplified 15% and our spark of resistance damage reduction as well. That is the main thing, and then it's your preference on what you want to build into next. I like to kind of keep a high amount of discipline and recovery, and then I've got as much strength in there as I could manage with the armor pieces and mods that I had available to me. Let's talk about weapons. Kinetic slot really is free, down to your choice. I don't really have any recommendation for this. I've been using Riptide a lot just because in the content that I've been testing in, such as the harder difficulty Lost Sectors and the Master Nightfall, there was unstoppable champions in there which I've been using Riptide for. In the energy slot, there are a lot of good options you can use, including the new Season Pass exotic Lodestar. This is the first ever kinetic ammo trace rifle, and it's a very good one as well. For saying it's kinetic with unlimited ammo, it does a decent amount of damage, and then it also has its arc alignment, which is its secondary firing mode. Essentially, you build up its meter by doing damage from any arc source. You can switch to this mode and it will let you spray out a beam that applies jolt to enemies. Again, fantastic for this build. Essentially guys, for both your special slot and your heavy, you just want to have arc weapons to take advantage of that arc siphon for building up your bolt charge and stuff like that. So other things that I've been using is a vantage point pulse rifle with jolting feedback and eddy current. I've found that to be very good as well, despite the fact that pulse rifles no longer have champion capabilities. They're a good mid-range weapon which I've been enjoying using. There is of course the Psycho Pump, which is the new area denial frame from the Nether activity. That is also arc as well, comes with some very good rolls. You can even mess around with glaives as well. As we've just discussed, glaive melees are going to help you build back up that melee ability energy should you run out of charges, so that is something that you consider if you are a glaive enthusiast. Quickly, let's talk about the heavy slot then. So you'll have seen me using Thunderlord in the video, and there are 2 reasons for that. The main one being currently at the moment, at the time of uploading this video, the only source of overload stunning we have for weapon mods is actually machine guns, but this is currently bugged and is not stunning overload champions. So until that's fixed, that leaves you with 2 options. You can either take advantage of elemental things to stun them, such as Jolt or Slow, or whichever one you are using within your loadouts, or you can use Thunderlord, which has intrinsic overload and is actually working for stunning champions. The other reason for this is it had a perk added to it with the patch note for Heresy that says lightning strikes grant a stack of bolt charge, and because of the fragments that we are running, this is going to give us 2 stacks of bolt charge every time we get a lightning strike. Not only that, Thunderlord is of course a fantastic weapon in itself. It does really good damage and sometimes is slept on, so this is currently a very good option and one of the only options if you are running something with overload champions in it. We also have the Watchful Eye, which is the new machine gun, which is arc from the Nether activity as well, and this comes with a perk called Rolling Storm. So despite the fact I don't have a particularly good roll yet, I do have one with Rolling Storm on it, and this says final blows grant bolt charge, while amplified final blows grant additional bolt charge. Now, as yet, I'm not actually sure if this stacks with the fragment that is giving us the extra bolt charges as well. If it does, that is crazy, but just know that this perk is going to allow you to do that at all times. So we're building even more into those bolt charge stacks. And again, guys, likewise with the special slot, the heavy slot also has a lot of options. If you have any arc linear fusion rifles, which you can pair with particle reconstruction from the artifact, that is going to be amazing as well. I haven't tried the Queen's Breaker with this yet. I've heard that's pretty nutty, but I don't have the catalyst as yet. So that is something that I'm going to test out with this build as well. And essentially anything that's arc you can use. I forgot to mention even Cloud Strike for the energy slot. That also has the same ability now as the Thunderlord one, where rapid precision hits with that are going to give you bolt charge stacks as well, so you might even want to consider that. As I said, just make sure that your heavy and your energy slot are both arc weapons, and that will synergize with this build really well. Just super quickly, I am going to mention the artifact mod, but to be honest with you, I don't actually rely on anything from this. It's just going to enhance it. So the things that I would pick up specifically for your arc are overclock and load, whilst you're amplified or have bolt charge, which we're going to have one or both of at all times. This is going to increase our reload speed and handling for arc weapons. We have dielectric, defeating arc debuff targets grants bolt charge, again another way to get even more bolt charge. And we then also have flashover. When you gain maximum bolt charge, you also become amplified. Lightning bolts deal more damage. So this is going to help if in a situation where you can't get a melee off on an enemy with knockout to go amplified. That is another way of obviously becoming amplified itself. And then in the final column, you might want to take particle reconstruction, as I just mentioned, but there is also defibrillating blast as well. Stunning a champion grants maximum stacks of bolt charge and triggers an arc bolt that heals you and jolts combatants that it damages. I don't actually have that one unlocked yet because I didn't sweat it out enough with my bounties apparently. So yeah, that is another option that I want to test, but on paper it sounds very, very good. Now, in terms of the build loop, guys, or how this build is played, there isn't a certain way or rotation of doing it as such. As I said, you're mainly going to want to decide what kind of content you are in. If you're in on-level content or content where you're not many levels below the power requirement, then you can run around ballistic slamming and you're making a ton of orbs. You are getting bolt charge. There's so much going on with this. You've also got your flashbang grenade if you need to blind and jolt enemies. And then if you are obviously in a situation where you can't be meleeing into massive groups at all times, you can sit back with your Storm's Keep, drop your barricade and do a ton of damage with your teammates from pretty much having constant stacks of bolt charge, and that is going to do a ton of weapon damage to bosses and things like that as well. So guys, let me know down in the comments below. I will also pin the dim link for you to copy straight across. Let me know what you think about this build. Had you been messing with anything similar? Obviously, if there's any changes you think I've missed where we could make this build even better, then obviously I want it to be the best version it can be. So do let us know. But I hope you have fun with this build, guys. It is really strong and it's a ton of fun as well. I have a lot more builds for all three classes coming near on daily for the next few days as well. So if you're not subscribed already, make sure to do so if you feel I've earned that today. But otherwise, wherever you are in the world, have a great day and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.